On the 9th of October, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko met in Kyiv with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The Turkish leader visited Ukraine for the sixth meeting of the high-level strategic council between the two countries. Here's how Poroshenko met his Turkish counterpart. Erdogan maintains close ties with both Ukraine and Russia, as well as Eastern Europe. His country ostensibly supports the cause of Ukraine's Crimean Tatars, but opposes sanctions on the Kremlin for annexing the Crimean Peninsula. Let's take a look at what both leaders said about Crimea earlier this week.
At previous press conferences, I highlighted how delicate the Crimea annexation question is for Turkey. We're trying to take all possible measures to help our brothers, the Crimean Tatars, who are currently imprisoned. I think time will show the result of our efforts.
I invited Turkey to join our circle of friends for the deoccupation of Crimea, the initiative I announced from the United Nations rostrum in New York. We are very grateful and appreciative for Turkey's strong stance in the support of Ukrainian sovereignty, territorial integrity and its independence, including Turkey's refusal to recognize the illegal annexation of Crimea. So where do Turkish-Ukrainian ties stand and where are they going? We're joined by former Ukrainian ambassador to Turkey, Sergiy Korsunsky. Good evening, Mr. Korsunsky.
Good evening.
Or should I say Ambassador Korsunsky?
It's your choice.
All right. Ambassador Korsunsky, how would you characterize the President Poroshenko's meeting this week with President Erdogan? What were the big takeaways?
First of all, we should understand that Turkey is one of the major regional powers which is around the Black Sea, and its position is extremely important from every point of Ukrainian foreign policy, I mean economically and politically. And definitely number one priority right now, that's the occupation of Crimea. So we have to work with Turkey. Doesn't matter how Turkey cooperate with Russia. So the meeting was very important. It has been happening maybe in May, but due to different reasons it was happening in October, and I think it was important that our presidents would discuss again where we are, what should we do, and if Turkey would join the circle of friends of Ukraine in this initiative which was announced at the United Nations, that will be extremely important.
All right, before we go on, let's listen to what the President said when summing up the results of the visit.
Today, our delegations thoroughly discussed our cooperation in the trade, economy and investment sectors. Over just 6 months of this year, the trade turnover between Ukraine and Turkey increased by almost 20%. The level of Turkish investments into the Ukrainian economy increased significantly as well. Turkey is now one of Ukraine's top 5 trade partners and top 10 foreign investors. The much-anticipated bilateral agreement on investment protection and the alterations we made to the double taxation agreement will give extra momentum to our bilateral communication.
I'm especially glad that we have signed the Mutual Alliance and Investment Protections Agreement and the Double Taxation Agreement. During our conversation, we have looked at the steps that we will take to develop our cooperation in transport, tourism, and the energy sector, in our military relations, defense industry, and culture. Apart from that, I would like to share some good news with our audience. In order to satisfy Ukraine's great interest in the Turkish language and culture, we are opening a Turkish cultural center named for Yunus Emre. With God's help, time will show that the Ukrainian and Turkish nations have grown even closer.
So Poroshenko and Erdogan signed several important agreements, and probably the most important are an investment protection agreement and the double taxation avoidance agreement. Ambassador Korsunsky, what is the significance of these documents in your view?
Actually, if we, to say strictly to the facts, those both agreements, they have been signed in 90s and they were existing until recently, but 2 years ago it was decided on both sides that they have to be seriously updated because of changes in both Ukrainian and Turkish legislation, and to make them more useful instrument for developing of our cooperation. And I'm very glad that it was done. I already left Turkey a year ago, so it was without me, but definitely it was a very important step. And the next one should be free trade.
And the Deputy Minister of Economy of Turkey has said that this agreement might be signed in 2017. So how likely is it to happen?
The problem is that basically this agreement already maybe 75–80% negotiated and agreed upon. But the problem is that there are some sensitive issues in this agreement, which on issues concern the opening of the markets in Ukraine for Turkish goods and in Turkey for Ukrainian goods. And unfortunately, we are not able to come at this point to the final resolution of those issues, but they have been discussed. What is important to understand in our relations with Turkey, we have no problem on political level. So that means that political will is there. So it's up to the professionals, to industries, to talk between them and to agree upon the schedule, how we can open our market for industrial goods for Turkey, and Turkey would open its agricultural market for Ukrainian products. Because for us, right now, agriculture is probably #1 priority, taking into account the export potential of Ukraine.
Why so much effort, Ambassador? Why ties with Turkey are so important to Ukraine?
We have to, I'll tell you, this is maybe not so widely known fact, that among all our trade partners, Turkey and Ukraine has a huge positive trade balance. Say, if we have 6 billion trade, 2 billion plus, it's on the Ukrainian side. And this is extremely important for our economy because the whole balance, trade balance of Ukraine, normally, as a rule, for 25 years is negative, generally negative. The most part of it is oil and gas. We were exporting oil and gas from abroad, specifically from Russia, and that it was distorting the balance. But with Turkey, we were always on positive side. So for us, Turkey was always the second destination of our export. Generally, in best years, we have had 8 billion trade. It's huge by Ukrainian standards. So right now, then it was decreasing because of war in Syria, because of occupation of Donbass, and because of annexation of Crimea. But right now it is improving, and this is very good. That means we are now started to get out of this crisis, both internally in Ukraine and bilaterally with Turkey. And for us, it's but agriculture now, rather than steel products as it was before, now agriculture is more important, and for Turkey this is very sensitive. And that's the similar position Turkey attached to every other free trade agreements with other countries. But now with Ukraine, we already negotiating very thoroughly for 2 or 3 years those issues. Hopefully they will be resolved soon.
You have already briefly touched upon the essence of my next question, but we know that Turkey maintains rather good relations with Russia as of now. And what sort of tension does it create in Ukrainian-Turkish relations, if any?
Definitely, that's a point of, I would not say concern, but very thoroughly watch on our side, the Turkish relations with Russia. I would like to stress that for Turkey, the principle of pragmatism in foreign relations is extremely important. From pragmatic point of view, Turkey is exporting 27 billion cubic meters of gas. It's more than 50% of Turkey's consumption. Number of Russian tourists per year exceeds 4 million. And this is probably, normally it was number 1, 2, they were with Germany. So it's huge money. We are talking about tens of billions of dollars of income to Turkey. A huge number of projects for billions and billions in construction area were conducted by Turkish companies. Russians are not able to build stadiums for World Cup next year. It was this job was in hands of Turkish companies. And then when the famous accident happened with Su-24, and Russia kicked out all Turkish business out of the country, it was visible that the loss of, on economical side is huge. So therefore, for Turkey, this is number 1. It's extremely important. They have to cooperate. But number 2, the issue which is emerged with Syrian conflict, that Turkey realizes now, more than ever before, that without Russia, unfortunately for us, definitely, we would be welcome if it would be Turkish-American alliance or Turkish-European alliance, and NATO would be probably more active in this conflict. But what happened, it just happened, that Russia and Iran and Turkey, they found the ground how to cope with this Islamic State. The most important issue in Syrian conflict right now, it's not Assad, it's Islamic State. This is terrible terrorism. It's absolutely unbelievable what they are doing in their territories. So to clean up Syria from Islamic State, it's in the interest of Russia, Turkey and United States and ours as well. So therefore, taking into account this political issue, Turkey had to cooperate with Russia. So I would not overestimate level of deep love in between Turkey and Russia, I would say. They have their serious problems still on economic side. And definitely the issue of Crimean Tatars on the radars, because for Turks it is absolutely principal issue that Crimean Tatars, they call them Crimean Turks. So this is a keen nation for Turks.
Yeah, and actually they call them their brothers.
Brothers, yeah. And
at the same time, while not recognizing the annexation of Crimea by Russia, they do not support sanctions against Russia.
Yes, and we, as you may imagine, we have been discussing this issue many, many times on different levels. Principal position of Turkey is that they do not trust sanctions. They do not believe in sanctions. They believe that you have to fight in court, you have to fight in international organizations level. That's what we are doing. But sanctions, they believe it's not workable framework. And by the way, when we talk about this right now, we can see that on one hand, we have a very thorough regime of sanctions from Western world, but at the same time, just one visit of King Salman from Saudi Arabia brought $10 billion of common fund, joint fund with Russia. So investment will be coming from the Persian Gulf, from China, from Eastern world. So that from Turkish point of view, this is another justification. So why we would implement sanctions regime if anyhow it will not work? We see the world differently. We believe sanctions are extremely important. We believe that Russia would like to maintain very good relations with the West. It's an important destination of their goods, their cooperation, and Russian oligarchs are hiding money in the West. So definitely sanctions must be in place. But Turkish position, it's like principle. It's not because of Ukraine, Russia, but generally speaking, they say we will not support any kind of sanctions regime in the world.
Coming back to Crimean Tatars, do you think that the actual help that they get from Turkey is as effective as Mr. Erdogan claims?
I think that they value very much Turkish position. Because I know for sure that at every meeting of Turkish officials with Russian officials, they raise this issue. They talk about Crimean Tatars. They bring this issue on the table in different international organizations. The other thing, whether Russians are listening to those requests, definitely, you know, Turkey is going through their own internal complicated political problems, specifically after this last year attempt of the coup d'etat. So what we see right now, of course, we would like to see more active position of Turkey. Of course, we would like to see more persistent push of those issues together with us on different levels. But again, the foreign policy, it's an art of possibilities. We cannot use this if and somehow we want to achieve the results. And with Turkey, I think what has been achieved during the recent visit, that was probably maximum we can get right now. And definitely we have to reciprocate. We have to work with Turkey on the issues in their interests. And that's exactly the art of foreign relations with other countries, how you build this balance.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Korsunsky, and we'll be back in a moment.